Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. How are you doing today? We are going to have a very interesting discussion with Mr. Greg Dickerson. How you doing, sir?
Doing great, Michael. How are you today?
I'm doing really, really well. So do me a favor. Let's tell people where they can find you because you are putting out some amazing content about the topic we are about to go through. And I think people need to look up and subscribe to your channel.
Yeah, absolutely. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So gregdickerson.com is my website. I have a YouTube channel, podcast, all in my name. So it's easy to find on YouTube. Just Google Greg Dickerson and you'll see it come up. And be careful. There's a lot of scammers out there and they're getting very sophisticated. They're actually copying. You're probably seeing it on your channel.
Yeah.
They copy your name, your profile picture, and they put contact me on WhatsApp and Telegram and they're going onto your other social media channels. So I think a lot of people are starting to wise up to it, but just be aware of that, be careful, and watch for those scammers in the comments.
Yeah, folks, I will never use a WhatsApp app. I don't even have a WhatsApp app. I never will have
Telegram.
one. Yeah, it's not us. It's not Greg or I. So don't believe those. I do block them every time I find them, but they're getting sneaky. And they're not only leaving comments now, but they're really getting sneaky is they're leaving comments on somebody else's comments, which are like buried. So very interesting. So I wanted to have a conversation with Bitcoin with you, specifically Bitcoin, because I've been watching your channel the last couple of weeks. And I just want to ask some questions. So let me just lay my foundation. I guess it was late last year. I think it was November of last year. I had the position and I shared on my channel that I was going to take 1% of my net worth and move it into Bitcoin, right? I did that. I shared it. I call it, and I still do, an insurance policy. So I wanted to talk to you about Bitcoin because I think you can invest in it, which I don't think I do. I think you can trade it, which I know I don't do. Or as I've done, I just call it an insurance policy. I bought it, put it on the shelf, don't look at it. So you're putting out some amazing stuff. You're looking at trend lines and charts and making calls. So I just wanted to ask you, what is going on in the Bitcoin world? Because it's crazy.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So I've been involved in it for the last 4 or 5 years. I was first introduced to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies by a friend of mine, and I started playing around with it. So I'm opportunistic. I'm an opportunistic investor, and I follow the greatest investors of our times. You know, the Warren Buffetts, the Paul Tudor Jones, the Steve Schwartzmans. When you look at the greatest investors, they're all swing traders. They're all traders at the end of the day. They're just different time frames. So when it comes to investing, that's the approach that I take. And then to your point, there's 3 ways to really invest in Bitcoin. One, a lot of people are what they call hodlers, HODL, hold on for dear life. So they're like you, they just take a certain amount, they put it in there and they just forget about it, kind of like any other long-term investment. Then you have swing traders like me that trade on momentum with the trends in the market, try to sell around the peaks, try to get back in at the bottom and just increase and compound, kind of like my strategy of real estate development. You build something, create value, you sell it, and you compound and you grow your investment portfolio. And then you have the day traders, the people that are trading on daily action, and it could be time frames anywhere from the 1 day to the 4 hour to the 1 hour to the minute.
Yeah.
And, and that's a job, right? If you're going to day trade, that's a job. And that's one of the things that we talk about that you can do if you're looking for a way to subsidize your day job and you want to create extra income on the side. If you get good at that and educate yourself, you can make some money in it, especially with cryptos, because they have such wild swings. I mean, Bitcoin can swing, 10 to 20% in a day. A lot of these cryptos can swing 20, 30, 40% in a day back and forth. So there's a lot of opportunity there, but you can also get in trouble and lose money fast too. So you have to be really careful. But Bitcoin has really attracted a lot of attention lately. Number one, because of the wild swings. I mean, 18 months ago, it was around 10,000. We had the big sell-off in March. It hit a real low, and then it's been off to the races and hit $65,000 earlier this year. And we've been in a little bit of a sell-off and a downtrend ever since. And Bitcoin went from 65 down to 30, and now it's been trading in a range between 30 and 40,000. Lately, it's been below 35, and then today it bounced up and it's testing that $40,000 range again, looking for a breakout. So there's been a lot of attention. Bitcoin's been in the news. Cryptocurrencies have been in the news with the ransomware, cyber attacks, things like that, with those individuals and groups wanting to get paid in cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. You have Elon Musk tweeting every other day about Dogecoin, Bitcoin, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of attention on the space in the industry, but it's very misunderstood out there. And there's this thing called FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. around cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. A lot of people don't understand don't understand it, which makes them afraid of it. And then you have the uncertainty and the volatility in the markets, which make people doubt it as an investment, as a store of wealth long term.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of interesting things going on in the space right now. And it's a very exciting time for Bitcoin and for cryptocurrencies in general.
Yeah. So right. So on purpose, I moved 1% of my net worth into it. I got in, I think it was November of last year. Haven't really looked at it unless so I have a friend like you who is in it huge, and he occasionally texts me stuff. Because again, to me, it's an insurance policy. It's the same thing I did 15 years ago with what I did silver, right? But I like to hold them, right? I don't like ETFs and I don't like all that stuff, right? Now, if I were to put 1% of my net worth in silver or gold or platinum or whatever it is, it'd just be a bigger number. And I'm like, I don't want to store that stuff. So that's one of the reasons I saw Bitcoin as being digital gold back in November. I saw more institutions going that way. That's what made me feel comfortable. I was first introduced to Bitcoin during the last run up by the same friend who came to my house and was shaking with excitement. He showed me this little key fob around his neck. And he said, oh, I don't even remember what he said, but basically it was holding 7 figures of tokens. And I'm like, when he left, I'm like, I'm not touching that at all. That freaking scares the shit out of me. I don't know what the hell he's doing. But what was different and why I finally moved some money into it is because I saw it really being a store of wealth. I don't see it as a currency, right? I don't see it as although, El Salvador just, did what they did. But for me, it's a store of wealth. It's just like a gold bar, right? You couldn't take a gold bar to a grocery store. Yes, you can do that with Bitcoin at some places, but that's not what I see it as. I see it as just a way that 1%, just in case the Fed does something stupid, like Paul Tudor Jones said today on CNBC, if the Fed just pretends inflation's not real, right? He's got 5% of his net worth in Bitcoin. That's going to do really well, right? So the other thing is, when you look at Bitcoin, it seems to be, as not a trader, not an investor, someone who doesn't look at it, it does seem to be very headline driven, right? What did Elon Musk say? What did El Salvador say? What's going on with power generation or whatever the heck's going on, renewable energy? How can an asset move so much just on headline risk? It feels kind of odd to me.
Yeah, so it's a new asset, and the Fed has been very clear. Jerome Powell, Janet Yellen, they've been very clear that it is an asset. Okay, it's not a currency, and it doesn't really function efficiently as a currency in a lot of different ways just because of the technology. But what a lot of people don't realize is they look at an asset like Bitcoin, they say, well, it's right now $40,000. Man, I can't afford that. I can't buy a Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin is divisible by what they call Satoshis. Yeah. So you can buy $1 worth of Bitcoin. Absolutely. You can buy $100 worth of Bitcoin. So in that essence, the initial vision for it was a peer-to-peer currency that could be used anywhere in the world without a middleman, no credit card companies, no banks, things like that. And, but it was very difficult and not inexpensive to function that way. Mm-hmm. So what it really functions as and what it's really best used as right now is a store of value. And it's an asset equivalent to gold, but it's in digital form, right? It's a digital mm-hmm. gold. So yeah. When countries come out like El Salvador and they say, okay, we're going to make this a official currency or an acceptable currency in our country, legal tender in our country, that means that they're going to require all the merchants and everybody to accept it. Yeah. Now, actually making that happen is a whole nother animal. And you can get credit cards that are, that allow you to use your Bitcoin and spend it, and that's the hodler thing. Like a lot of people say, I'll never sell my Bitcoin. I'm holding on forever. You can't get me to sell it. But they're using it and they're spending it on their lifestyle. So when you do that, you're selling. So even mm-hmm. if you have a credit card that's a Bitcoin credit card, that's, a bank that holds or a custody holder that holds your Bitcoin, and they give you a credit card so you can spend your Bitcoin, it converts it to dollars. So you're selling, in that sense to sustain your lifestyle. So people that say I'm never selling, they're selling when they have to convert it to cash to use it. So it's inefficient in that regard, but its highest and best value is always going to be as an asset. Mm-hmm. And governments are not going to superpower governments, the G7, the G12, they're not going to allow another currency to take over.
Yeah.
So that is why the narrative of a currency is not positive for Bitcoin. The narrative of a store of value is positive for Bitcoin. That's why you're seeing even governments come out and say that's what it is. It's an asset. It's a store of value. Right. It's not a currency. And then there's the argument, well, how can they stop that? Well, because the U.S. is not going to adopt Bitcoin as a currency. It just
exactly.
Ain't gonna happen.
Pretty easy.
We're creating, that's easy. We're creating, and even Michael Saylor, one of the biggest proponents of Bitcoin, biggest voices out there, will tell you that the U.S. dollar, is the reserve currency of the world.
Yeah.
Nothing is likely to replace that anytime soon, if ever. And Bitcoin has its place as digital gold.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of great news, but again, going back to that doubt conversation in terms of the news easily moving an asset, well, that's kind of what the narrative is. There's one narrative saying, well, the news moves the asset, and then there's the other narrative that there's just a lot of a lot more interest and a lot more adoption of the asset. So that's kind of what's moving it. And to your point, a lot of institutions are getting involved. Banks are looking at it. It's very punitive of an asset for a bank to hold because they're required to match it dollar for dollar. So if you hold $1,000 worth of Bitcoin on your bank balance sheet, you have to match that with dollars.
Yeah.
And if it loses its value, you have to add that loss to your balance sheet. So it's very punitive for banks. So banks are not likely to hold the asset on their balance sheet, at least banks that are governed by central banks and the IMF. Hence, that's why the IMF is going to El Salvador and saying, wait a minute, we need to talk about this, official currency idea that you have and experiment that you're conducting and how that's going to impact your ability to borrow from us and service the debt that you currently owe us in that regard. So it's really interesting times, and there's a lot of great news around Bitcoin. The environmental discussion is a real one. A lot of people want to dismiss it, but it's not just Bitcoin. ESG is everywhere in the corporate world now. Every company is putting compliance in place for ESG, environmental, social, and governance, in terms of how they operate, how they affect the environment, and how they conduct business internally in their community and around the world. So it's a huge, important narrative that can't be ignored. And there's some really positive news coming out about, there's a lot of misunderstanding about the energy consumption to mine Bitcoin and sustain the network in regards to how much power it uses versus other things. And, especially when Elon comes out and says, oh, Bitcoin's bad for the environment, it's not environmentally friendly. Well, what he does every day.
Yeah. Last time I checked, making a battery is not particularly good for the environment.
Yeah, try flying a rocket to the moon.
Exactly.
Or Mars. There's nothing environmentally friendly about that at all, right? So, so it's an interesting conversation, but it's real, okay? And what's really cool is Bitcoin is evolving and adapting and becoming more credible by the day, including this recent price action that a lot of people are really not understanding what's going on. Bitcoin is establishing itself as a credible asset from an institutional standpoint for broad adoption across the board. So it has to go through this this transformational process, this refinement, if you will, to number one, establish, okay, what's the bottom? Where's the base? How far can this asset go that it cannot go below any further? And how high can it go where it's realistic for people to have confidence in the long-term value of the asset? So that's kind of where it's at right now. It's in its infancy. There's a lot of great news. There's more adoption every single day. And then there's always people that are going to be the naysayers and the doubters. And it's and a lot of it's because they just don't understand, and people are afraid of what they don't understand.
Yeah. The biggest reason I put part of my net worth in it is actually something that's rather simple, but to me is what it takes Bitcoin higher if it ever does. And that is the aspect of cold storage, right? Bitcoin is, I think most people know, is it has a fixed number of coins or tokens or whatever you want to call it. I think it's 21 million. And what I kept reading about before I put $1 in is just, it's a remarkable percentage of coins that go into cold storage, meaning once they're purchased, they're kind of off the market and they're not traded again. And as I see that percentage grow and grow and grow into a fixed supply, prices go up, right? Because it's a smaller and smaller amount that will be used to transact. That's one of the reasons that even with gold, right? Or platinum, you can still mine gold, right? They're still out there. You can still get it. You can still recycle other things and pull it out. There's only ever going to be 21 million. At least that's what I've read. So that was probably the most exciting thing for me, is the notion of cold storage. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the attributes of it that makes it the perfect gold, right? So it's instantly transferable,
Mm-hmm.
it's divisible, it's finite, and so that's part of the attraction of it. That's one of the reasons that it does have the allure and the value that it has. The network is supposedly it's decentralized, so it's not controlled by one entity or one individual, although there are groups of individuals that mine and maintain the network that have recently created a council for environmental discussion, things like that. There's a recent upgrade that the 90% of the miners had to agree to
Yeah, Taproot.
in order,
Yep.
Taproot, in order for that to take place, which will make the technology more usable for a lot of other applications in a lot of different ways. But yeah, um, the main reason that it has so much value long term is for that limited supply conversation. Now, there are people that say that that can be increased, that it's not indefinitely limited, that there is a way that the supply can be increased. So we'll see how that goes long term and what that argument looks like down the road. The security of the network is supposed to be unhackable. But we've seen some things in the past, so we'll see what the long-term viability of the asset is, whether it is and will be and always will be the digital gold, and nothing else comes along, competes with it, takes its place, replaces it, whatever. So it's still new enough. It's been around long enough, but it's still new enough that we don't know the ultimate long-term outcome of the asset. But it's really interesting, because I remember when you and I were talking about it, and I asked you, so why did you take 1%? And you're like, well, that's just because what somebody said.
Yeah,
and
it is.
And you called it, a hedge against inflation. You never really did any research, but it's interesting. What was your basis in that?
Well, basically is something I've done historically, like 15 years ago, is I wanted to put a part of my net worth in something that wasn't real estate. That was what I did 15 years ago. Back then, I didn't know any better. I bought physical silver, physical gold, and just a touch of platinum. I wanted to do that again, right? Real estate's been going up. Anytime things increase in value, I get nervous, and I'm like, okay, time for an insurance play. I was ready to go do silver, gold, and platinum again. And then I did the math. I'm like, I'm not storing that. I'm not going to pay someone else to store it. So what else can I do? And I have this friend that keeps chirping in my ear. And I did my research for like 30 or 45 days. I got the finite, divisible. I see the, not necessarily Bitcoin, but the crypto space, this peer-to-peer, all of that being something that's very interesting for other things. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to put 1%. I just consider it an insurance policy. It's not a trade. It's not an investment. I don't look at it. I haven't added to it. I won't add to it. That's why. I mean, I just wanted to have something that wasn't correlated to real estate.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's an investment that you made. And I think, what did you pay for your Bitcoin? Like 10, 20,000?
No, I think I got half of it at 14 and half of it at 16, I think. Something like that.
So that's interesting. So your mentality was one whole Bitcoin. Is that kind of how you looked at it, or
1% of my net worth?
1% okay, 1% of your net worth. So everybody's going to be doing that math real quick. Michael's going to find it.
Yeah, I haven't told anyone. So nobody can do that. I haven't given them the two factors.
Yeah, that's funny. So that's really interesting. Now, how often do you look at the price of Bitcoin?
Maybe 3 times a month, maybe.
Okay. Is there ever a price that you would be, what, I think I'm going to cash in?
Nothing that's within the realm. I mean, if it went to $1 million, something stupid. For me, an insurance policy is something I cash in decades from now. I don't trade it. Like when it got to, I think I saw it over, I think the time I saw it was like 62,000 or something, which was meaningful, meaningful. Didn't register. I was like, great. Then it goes down to 30,000. That doesn't matter.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So for you, literally, it's an insurance policy to be cashed in on at some point.
Yeah, that's absolutely what it is. Yes.
Okay. So what if that point comes and it's $5,000?
It's an insurance policy. Didn't pay out.
Okay. Yeah. So that's an interesting way to look at it. So you're looking at that $29,000 investment as an insurance policy premium that if you decided or needed to cash it in at some point, it may be there, but it may not be there. It just depends on the value. Because Bitcoin's done this. Now, historically, it's never gone below its previous high in a previous market cycle. So
Yep.
last high was like 20,000, and we've gone over 65. So
Yeah.
history would say that it's not going to go below or stay below 20,000. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I have more than a coin. So yeah, the price points were 14 and 16. It's not only 29 grand. So if somebody's going to go out there and do the math on 29 grand, you'd be wrong on the net worth.
That's funny.
Yeah. So
That's
for
really
me,
true. So
it's really not a trade. It really is just,
and you're not
buying anymore.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. So there's probably a lot of people out there just like you that did the same thing at all different levels, and they just did it. Don't even look at it. Don't even care. And then there's, people that trade it by the hour, by the minute, by the day. It's really an interesting asset in that way.
Yeah.
There's not really any other asset, I think, that's quite like that.
I agree. So how often do you look at Bitcoin's price, and like in a given month, how many times are you in and out? Just curious.
Every day. So I'm all day, every day throughout the day, because, I have so many people asking me about it, and I haven't really talked about it much. Because number one, I don't want to encourage people to invest in things they don't understand. Number one, because I'm all about education. And the first thing I tell everybody is educate yourself. Number two, so there's the other aspect of the space. So there's Bitcoin, and then there's the altcoins, right? Alternative coins. And those are any other coins that are not Bitcoin. And those are like stocks, right? That's like a venture capital space. And a lot of those are fake. They're phony.
Oh, yeah.
They do what's called rug pulls, where these people will get together, they'll create this business plan, put up a website, they'll issue tokens, they'll cash in, and next thing you know, they're gone.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people out there that do the pump and dump. So they'll get behind these coins, they get paid as influencers to promote these things and stuff like that. So I've had so many people asking me about the space, asking me about Bitcoin, stuff like that. People knew that I was had invested in it, things like that. So I said, you know what, I'm going to start talking about it. But the first thing I say to everybody, look, you got to educate yourself. Number one, you need to understand what it is, what it's about. If you want to invest in these other altcoins, you need to understand who the team is behind it. You need to vet it like it's a company.
Yeah.
Who's the team? What's the product? What are they doing? Where is the use case? Where is it being used? Like Ethereum, right? Ethereum's a network where a lot of applications are built on top of, which is what this upgrade to Bitcoin is going to allow in terms of the blockchain network. So you need to understand the technology behind it, who the people are, and the history of it. And you need to look at the what they call market cap of these coins, which is the value of the coins, based on the number of tokens that are in circulation. Like Bitcoin right now is, I don't know, 600-700 billion. It was over $1 trillion. The whole market cap of all of it's, a couple $1 trillion, I think now, when you add Bitcoin to it, a little bit over 2 trillion, in terms of the capital that's in the space. And you think about gold, gold's 10 trillion. So there's a long way to go for these assets. But it's a tricky space. You got to know what you're doing. And as we've seen, man, it's got some serious, fluctuation. So I watch it on a daily basis and try to provide education. I try to bring the institutional perspective to it so that people out there can understand, well, how are institutions looking at this asset? How are the banks looking at this asset? And why are they all of a sudden getting involved? Whereas they've been involved probably since 2016, 2017, maybe some a little earlier, but most of the bigger outfits have been involved since 2016, 2017. They've really gotten involved this year. All the big banks are putting trading desks in place to trade the asset, to provide advisory services for their clients. Same as me, because their clients are asking for it. So I work with people all over the world doing a lot of different things. Everybody's been asking me about it. I've got family offices that I advise, high net worth individuals, companies that are doing the same as you. They want to allocate. They're looking to me to help them make those decisions. So that's why, I've started producing daily content, really monitoring it on a daily basis.
Well, folks, do yourself a favor. My channel will never become a Bitcoin channel because, as you've seen, I don't look at it. So what I do is I follow Greg Dickerson on YouTube. Go to his channel, subscribe. A lot of amazing content. That's where I get my updates pretty much every day on Bitcoin. So, Greg, I want to thank you for that. Thank you for this conversation. It was so helpful. Again, and have a wonderful week.
You too, Michael, and I look forward to one Bitcoin at a time.
That's awesome. Thanks, buddy.